welcome everybody to our Future of Work series. I'm really excited to be hosting this session, following on from some of the thought leaders that you would have already heard from. Today we have Cavanagh-Lomas, Cisco's VP for People and Communities here in EMEA. We also have Milora, who's the Director of Operations for our Workplace Experience. He's based out of Philadelphia, and he actually is our Head of Workplace Design. And we also have Dr. Keith Griffin, based out of Ireland, who's a distinguished engineer and in fact holds the most number of patents of any engineer in collaboration in our organisation. And the reason that we've brought these three people together is because we're very, very focused here at Cisco around three themes, around the people, the place or space, and the technology, and how we bring those together to create an environment that is really engaging for our employees. You would have heard already that Cisco was able to achieve the position of #1 great place to work in the world, and we all know that there's a combination of things that need to come together in order to be awarded the #1 great place to work, and that's after some 100 million employee surveys independently done from employees around the world. So we feel very good about that, but of course the combination of people, place and technology is really, really relevant, and that's why we've brought this audience together for you today. So welcome everybody. I'm going to put my first question to Elle, if I may, and it really is a little bit about, at the start of COVID-19, at the start of the pandemic, there's probably a few things on your mind. One would imagine that the first place that we went to was the well-being of our employees and how we maintained that. We also had the challenge of, we needed to still exist as an organisation. We still needed to support our customers and our partners, and we needed to remain productive. And so, well-being first, probably, maintaining our business as best we could. But then, of course, overnight, we sent everybody home. And so, therefore, how do we maintain an engagement with our employees was probably really, really important. So if we think about those sorts of three themes of sort of well-being, productivity and engagement, may I ask you to sort of speak about what your thoughts were, what was our approach, and what was really relevant and our priorities on handling those three themes?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here. It's great to be talking about this. I feel like it's been a very emotional time, actually, in talking about this topic. When we first started, we say that we closed down our offices overnight. We actually had sort of 4 sleepless nights at least, trying to decide what to do, when to make that decision, how to make sure that we aligned with recommendations from the government, from medical professionals, but also got ahead of that. Our general managers on the ground were getting more and more anxious, and we made the decision then that we would close down across the board. We know that with our WebEx technology that people were able to go to a video conversation straight away, and that we weren't worried about that. So we had to find a way then to say, well, that wasn't enough. It was about how do you create the place for all the other things. So you talk about well-being. Well, when we first started this, it was quite a lot about physical well-being. It was about, do people make enough time to leave the house? It's so easy when you work from home to sit at your desk from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, if not more, let's be honest. And so how do people make space? And we saw it go crazy on the televisions and everything, with people like Joe Wicks leading exercise routines and people in different countries doing the same. And people sort of took their physical health quite seriously. Some people did. Some people talked a lot about gaining the COVID-19 pounds, that they suddenly just wanted to eat and stay in the house. So we realised really quickly that we had to offer people a set of resources to help them with whatever they needed from a wellbeing perspective. We have a huge amount out there in our Pavelka house, which is based around eat, sweat, think, connect. And actually that deals with both the physical and the emotional side of it. What we didn't bank on, I think, quite as much is, and I guess we knew this would come, but not when, was the impact of people's mental health, of not being able to leave the house, of being locked down, of being separated from loved ones. We know that when somebody was in hospital with COVID, that they couldn't go and visit them. That was incredibly traumatic for people. You know, many people lost their day-to-day conversation if they live alone. And it's easy to either try and find places to talk or to become a bit of a hermit. So we have talked massively with our managers. We were having coffee meetings. Loads of managers, most managers instigated a coffee chat every week. So they really dialed up the intensity. Our whole philosophy of engagement at Cisco is around attention from leaders on their people. So we dialed that up, gave them a forum to chat really, really regularly, and told our leaders that mental health challenges are the ones where, you know, an employer is often the first person to know if somebody commits suicide or something like that. So how can we stay really close through our technology and everything else to our people and be there for them on point? So I think that was really critical. By being online all the time, to your second point being, you know, having our access, we were able to serve our customers, and obviously they were adapting. We gave a lot of advice through that period, worked with many other companies to talk to them about our strategy, not least of how we were managing the offices, but to how we were helping our people. And the same with our partners. It's timed in really well that we were in discussion with our partners and could talk about what they were doing. And we were stealing best practices from each other, you know. At one point, engagement was all around you know, virtual cocktails, lip sync battles. We had the Cisco band in Spain. We had so many different people all on our technology, you know, little videos that seemed an entire band, which blew us away. You know, it was really amazing to see that. But I feel like with our customers and partners, the thing that made a real difference to our people was when we said to them, only do what you can do through this chapter. And all of a sudden, the pressure came off their shoulders because they knew they were trying to do the best they could. And their openness, their honesty, their relationship with customers and partners just really increased. Huge amount of honesty about what we were all facing and mutual support. And one thing about COVID is we've all been in it together, right? This one thing has united us in some crazy way. So I think they've all been focused, and I think now perhaps we'll save that for later on in terms of where we're going to go from here, because I do think the engagement of employees has been a really big consideration and will continue to be. So I'll pause there.
Well, wonderful, and thank you for that. You know, the human element is the critical element that we needed to get right. And as you pointed out, we were very, very lucky. We started, I think, it'd be fair to say, Elle, with the position that we've always been quite flexible around our work arrangements. And so while we had, as you quite rightly point out, 4 sleepless nights as we moved everybody home, they at least had the tools and the technology to do so, and that was already established. And so the decision was an easier decision rather than perhaps what some of our customers encountered, which was we need to move everybody home, but then we don't have the technology tools. And that would have added a significant amount of complexity to the problem that at least we had resolved with the technology platform in place. The next part I want to say is you know, what we're trying to have our audience think about is, you know, what is next? What are we thinking about in the next stage? If we're moving back to our offices or not, depending on the circumstances. Obviously, we're having some environments where people are talking about a second wave, and where we thought we were out, but now we're returning back to our homes. You know, what's our people and communities leader thinking about in terms of our employee engagement experience and well-being? You know, with a forward lens, rather than we had to do all of these things to get to this point, and we've been very, very focused on the mental health. I'm sure that's probably going to continue. You know, what do we think our customers need to think about, or what are you thinking about that you could share with them about the future workplace?
Yeah. So I think this is our new great focus, is what's the workplace of the future going to be like? And you know, it isn't about spaceships. This has all happened now. This is not a big future thing where something completely different has happened. But I think there's lots of things to consider. So we've got people who want to go back to work, who are itching to get back on the planes and get back out there. We've got people who never want to go back to work. We've got people who, you know, who really have realised that this gives them a different quality of life because they're able to balance their interests in a different way. Just simply saving the commute for many people has been a real impact, and they feel like they are able to in some way focused. So parents who are at home, for example, in the evening, who haven't been able to put the kids to bed because they just couldn't get home in time, are now home. They might be working later beyond that time to keep up with everything, but they are still able to do that. And that's really rewarding. So we know that people are going to want that, but we also know that they want the interaction, that, you know, they do want to be part of a team. We know from that the magic happens on teams. Our best team study, and creating that environment as either a static or a dynamic leader is so important. So I think that we may see offices used more as a place to come together when we need to do something substantial. So where we used to go off sites to hotels, will there be a world where our offices become the place where we congregate for things versus sitting there doing our to-do lists every day? You know, I don't think that will be necessary anymore. We will continue, and we have said that we will not be looking to do major events, you know, live into 2021. So we're going to need to find a way to keep people really engaged. And what I was going to say earlier, what I've mentioned, is that it's really easy when this first starts. We're all under pressure, you know, the cortisol's flowing, a bit of drama. We're like, what are we going to do to keep our employees connected? And we do so much stuff. But the question is, do we continue that well enough? So when we start and we say, okay, everybody's going to have their camera on, we're going to be very engaged in our conversations, we know the importance of eye contact. We know the importance of a smile to people's mental health. So keeping our cameras on long term and not getting complacent about that's a big deal, actually. Making sure that people feel really present in the conversation. And the technology gives us the ability to do that, but only if we use it. So continuing good practices is really important for our people across the board, and making sure that we continue. For example, attendance, we've done a weekly check-in with our CEO, Chuck, and Frank Katsu. Well, to do a weekly all-employee meeting in a company our size has been, you know, that's something that people have talked to us a lot about, how they can emulate. We saw attendance at those meetings almost double when they started, because we know we've had a combination of you know, speakers who were there to entertain us. We had speakers who were doctors. We had speakers who were other companies talking about how their experience. It's been a huge learning curve for us. So I think we need to keep those points of connection massively as we go forward.
Well, Elle, you've given me the perfect segue for us to introduce Ray by having the conversation about how everybody turned their cameras on. You know, Ray, as I mentioned, from Philadelphia, head of workplace design. Ray, you're looking at our workplace experience, and we mentioned that everybody went home over that sort of 4 evenings. What did you see? What actually happened at a technology level and at a workplace level? You know, what were the observations in the way that people were engaging with each other when we said everybody needs to go home now?
Yeah. Well, you know, I just want to say I'm glad Elle mentioned the COVID-19, so I don't have to go there. So, so that's good. She got that off the table. It's been pretty fascinating, actually, and you know, throughout everything Elle mentioned, also there was a theme of connectedness. I think you heard, you know, that's the one thing. If you put it all aside and you kind of, you know, we're missing that human connectedness thing, you know, and we saw that not only in technology use but also in commentary and the way we've handled the workplace during this time and are looking to in the future. So. From a technology standpoint, it was kind of fascinating. I mean, we were already a heavy WebEx user, right? I mean, it's our own technology and it's the way we work, but it literally shot through the roof. I mean, you know, you saw every meeting became a WebEx meeting, every conversation became a WebEx conversation, and you know, the use of our tools really increased. What we didn't expect and what we thought was pretty fascinating was email stayed almost perfectly flat throughout, and you would think. You know, off the top of your head, you would think, wow, if I have to get in touch with Vaughan, you know, I'm going to be on this call with him, but I'm going to follow up with an email. I'm going to do that. We didn't see that, which was kind of fascinating. And I think that leans even more towards this conversation around connectedness. You know, if you think about email, it's quite an impersonal tool, right? We've all had moments where we've read an email wrong. You know, we've gotten the wrong tone out of it, the wrong approach out of it, or something like that. But video is that fascinating thing, right, where you can see the person's expression and so on. And I think we've all learned to look for more cues on video as well, where before perhaps it was just you and I looking at each other, and yeah, now we're watching for facial expressions, and are your arms crossed, and perhaps do you see me sort of bumping up and down means I'm tapping my foot because I'm impatient, whatever it might be. So, I think the lack of connectedness helped really drive what we saw in the technology use, and I am sure that we're not alone in that. I don't think that's a uniquely Cisco thing. I think everyone is struggling with those kind of things, and the value our tools bring to fore is in a virtual work environment like we are now. It fills that gap for that connectedness desire that we all have. The other thing I'll just mention too is that we've long thought, as workplace strategists and workplace people, we've long thought that the real purpose of a physical environment is to connect. It is not to do what we would call singular work, right? So, commuting in, sitting in traffic, flipping open your laptop and staring at your email for 6 hours is not the best use of your time. It's certainly not the best use of the space's time, right? Because the spaces aren't made for that. I think the usage we've seen, the patterns we've seen, continue to support that and are very much framing where we want to go next. For space, again, this I don't think is uniquely Cisco. The role of space is to allow us to connect. It gives us a place to do that. It is not for singular work. We've proven now, I think the whole globe has proven now that singular work can be done from anywhere. And I think it will continue. We're going to focus on that trend moving forward and how that's going to sort of color and frame what we're going to do. And I think you're going to see a lot of others follow in that space. So,
right, you bring up an interesting concept there. I've been doing some interviews and speaking to some people about, for all that's transpired, the one industry that I'm quite pleased that I'm not involved in right now is corporate real estate. Because I think under that realization that we can all do this singular focused work from home, even before the pandemic struck, you and your team in your workplace design was looking at shrinking the floor plates of our offices. But we saw in areas like in APJC, we were doubling the amount of meeting rooms associated with that. So that connectedness, that having a place to meet rather than having a place to do singular work. We were already on that journey as part of workplace design. I imagine the current circumstances are just accelerating that line of thinking. Has there been any change in that?
No, not really. I mean, and we're hearing it from employees that, they're not saying they can't wait to get back to their desk to stare at a screen, right? You're hearing they want to come back and have a coffee, with their colleagues. They want to have a team meeting, that, whatever those things are, that kept them together. I think Elle touched on all this. You think about all the crazy stuff we were trying to do to recreate that environment or recreate that feel we get when we're together. And technology can take us extremely close to it, but there is nothing like human interaction, right? I mean, I think it's the one universal thing we're all missing is going and seeing our parents and, hugging our mom, whatever it might be. And we haven't been able to do those kind of things, So, I think if anything, and I think, you're going to see us do the same. It's going to be this shrinking, if you will, or this less focus on the individual seat, the individual, that kind of a thing in the workspace, and more around what we commonly call in workplace strategy activity-based design. So activity-based design is this idea that you are choosing a space that is best for the task that you are trying to do or your team is trying to do and the environment you want to have to do that, right? So if you want a more formal setting, perhaps it's a conference room where the door closes and there's a table with 4 chairs. If it's a more relaxed setting you're looking for, it's more soft seating, perhaps it's out in the open, it's more of like a lounge kind of a setup. You have these variations and it allows flexibility and choice to the individual. So it's not me dictating to you, Vaughan, hey, Vaughan, you have to go use this conference room to have that meeting. Meanwhile, you're thinking, this is actually, I have to have kind of a difficult conversation with someone. I'd rather have more relaxed environment to that because I don't want to come in with this air of, sort of I'm looking across the table at you kind of a thing, right? So, I think we've already done that here at Cisco. We have most of our spaces are set up for activity-based working, and I think you'll see us increase the need and increase the use of that. And also do the change management and the other things that comes with that, right? Because you don't just throw someone into a new space, right, and say, good luck figuring that out. So, we're going to give our employees and our partners and our colleagues the tools to understand how best to use space and then work with them to not only create it, but to modify it to their needs. So
Mm. Right, I'm going to come back to you in just a moment, but you raised an interesting matter. I'm going to bring Dr. Keith Griffin on the line. Ray was making the commentary about how we saw our real-time tools and our video utilisation, go exponential as everybody headed home. We also saw something like, exactly like 4 times the number of users come onto our WebEx platform, which you have responsibility for, design and architecture for. What was that journey for you in terms of we had 4 times the number of users? Did we see the same level of uptick in video utilization on our platform? And, what did we do to try and, make that possible? So if I could ask those 2 questions of you, and then we'll come back to Ray. I just want to ask him about some security elements of what we need to resolve. But I think it'd be interesting just to talk about what we saw on a global scale on our WebEx platform.
Yeah, thanks, Vaughan. It's been fascinating to listen to Ray and Elle because it just recapped what we lived through over the last few months. You can imagine in the collaboration business just how busy it was from, across all functions, but particularly in engineering, right? To have that volume of users come into a cloud system and to have the volume of meeting minutes to go past like 25.5 billion on a monthly basis of meetings minutes a month is just, it's phenomenal. I think it works out at something like 47,500 years of time per month spent on WebEx worldwide. It's mind-blowing. And all of this at a time when, supply chain and everything else was impacted. So you couldn't just throw servers at it. You couldn't just throw compute. And it led to one of probably the most interesting engineering times and challenges of my life and most of our teams. It's from a career perspective, it's phenomenal problems to try solve, and that's what every engineer wants to do and do well. So yeah, to your question, I mean, it's we applied every piece of engineering knowledge from feature to scale, you name it, to make it work, and it did work. We were able to support that volume of users worldwide. We applied a lot of different techniques to be able to manage that workload. It was phenomenal to be part of that. But there's a team globally that really worked exceptionally hard. And listening to what Elle had to say about the sort of wellness aspect of that, it was the easiest thing in the world when there was nothing else to do to come and sit in this seat, or the same for any of my colleagues, and do that first thing in the morning till last thing at night. But one thing I'll say about it is it gave everybody also at Cisco and in the collaboration group a huge sense of purpose, because you were really helping people to be able to work from home. As you said at the beginning, maybe the technology wasn't quite there in other organizations to be able to make this happen. And we saw a lot of new customers and existing customers expand, whether it was directly from the cloud, whether it was driving, upgrades to premise systems, whatever it was. And the good news is that it happened, that was predominantly successful across enabling all of those organizations. So yeah, I mean, I could go into a lot of the technical details of it, but I think in short, it's been just, incredible to be part of it. And, we've, like I said, we've learned a lot from it. And we've learned a lot about, maintaining the quality and security of the platform at that scale. And, you always have trade-offs in engineering. It can be easy to get the scale, but not at the price of things like security, quality, and many of the other aspects of the system that people would associate with Cisco WebEx.
Well, thank you, Keith, and for mentioning the security aspect. I'm going to take that back to Ray. So everybody goes home, we turn everybody on, we see this extraordinary ramp in video, both within our own organisation and around the world. But then what did we do around the security needs? Obviously we've got all of our intellectual property now transversing the internet. For all of our employees, all 70-odd thousand of them. What are the security elements, or what was it that the workplace team had to be mindful about once everybody headed home?
Great. I'm going to ask Keith to back me up on some of the more technical stuff on this, but it's a funny thing happens in times of crisis where your technology strategy is really tested, and the ones that were sound kind of seem like they're seamless and they were always there, right? It wasn't like, this big reaction. And, I think you saw that with what we went through. So from a purely physical environment, just thinking of buildings and stuff like that, when I think security from a facilities world, we just went into lockdown, right? So we basically just locked all the buildings down. We moved to a place where We had critical staff, obviously, that still had to go in. I think a lot of companies were in that scenario. We spoke to a lot of our peers and a lot of other companies who were having challenges in that space, which frankly ours, we didn't have a challenge there. So we were able to keep critical staff moving through. And not only from a security standpoint, from a health and safety standpoint. So we instantly moved to protocols around, I mean, I think you saw a lot of this in the news, but we had protocols around temperature checks, the kind of things that you do that we're still doing. From a technology side, I think you saw a lot of things happening behind the scenes that not only had we already planned, but we're already on the roadmap to do. Yeah. We were able to enable a lot of our teams that were normally in a space because of security concerns to do upgrades and other things for them while they slept, frankly, to sort of keep them going. We, as we have a group called the TAC, and a lot of people who, if you call and you need customer support, you get through to. That groups like that are traditionally an in-house sort of a team. They're working in an environment and so on. And we were pretty quickly, in fact, I think it took a weekend for the majority of the TAC teams for their capabilities to be upgraded so they literally could do their job from anywhere. So it was pretty fascinating to watch both of those happening simultaneously. And it really, again, it blurred the line, which we touched on earlier, between the physical space and the virtual space. It wasn't hey, we need to secure our buildings. Hey, we need to secure our stuff, kind of as a single theme. But Keith, do you want to bring anything in on that I might have missed, or?
No, I think that's, there's from the other aspect, maybe just a small piece to add would be the piece that Vaughan talked about around, say, the intellectual property. I mean, suddenly we went from an environment, if I think about the local office and the site leader for Cisco in Galway here, where we developed some of this technology. And we have that, or previously had that environment where you are working at your desk. Some of it is singular, some of it is activity-based work, but it's coding, right? It's a lot of coding. People have development environments set up, they have to access that. We had to pivot on that pretty quickly, where if you're at home, how do you access that? And if suddenly you need to reset something or get to the office, how do you do that remotely? And we really evolved our way of thinking about that whole interaction model. We clearly have the meeting, video, messaging, calling, and device technology. That was not a concern. It was more how do you collectively code and build product that's supporting the rest of the world that are trying to work remotely while working remotely yourself. So we ended up having to work very closely, with Ray's team for, driving some of those new protocols and new ways of working. But I think that was a key thing: is how do you keep doing that, and how do you do that where you're protecting that intellectual property, and how do you do that in co-working environments? You might have multiple people in the same household working from home in a limited space to work from. They could even be competitors. They could be working in competitive organizations, right? So there's all sorts of challenges in working environments that were completely new to us, and we were able to use the technology and also change our WebEx roadmap to be able to address some of those. And I'll talk about some of that in a few minutes.
We'll get to that in a moment. I'm going to ask Ray one final question, if I may, Ray, sure. which was very similar to the one that I asked Elle. We're covering people, place, and technology. The question to Elle was, what are we thinking about, for the future needs of our people? As we start to reopen, what's our strategy for the safe return to the office? What's our place strategy?
Yeah. What we're doing, there's sort of two tracks to that right now. So obviously we're following government, city, local, state, sort of regulations around, can we even reopen? Where are we with the pandemic? Clearly I think in EMEA, it is a much different story than in the Americas where I am now. We have a very large presence, as most people know, in California. California is not in a very good state right now. So, we're kind of following the lead of local health officials and so on. Just first and foremost, can we even open? Is it safe to open and so on? We have a very robust plan once we can go into a open phase, and it's a multi-tiered approach. It starts with critical staff. It goes through multiple phases. We are prepared to go forward and backwards in that approach. So if we're starting to move into phase 1, phase 2, and something happens, there's a spike, whatever it might be, we can move backwards and forwards pretty easily. We're adjusting our service models accordingly, our cleaning regimes accordingly, everything you would expect, from a physical environment. So we have that all sort of happening. In parallel to that, we're really, we've always sort of been thinking about what's next, but I think you touched on it in the very beginning. If nothing else, this has accelerated that now dramatically, right? So if you think... Yeah, if you think about the comments we've been making about connected versus singular work, the fact that the three of us are on this call, the way we're interacting isn't just for this call. I mean, we really think about the physical environment as a mixture of people, technology, and the physical space, right? So I think those bonds are even tighter now than before, and you're going to see our strategy reflect that. It's going to look at space in a much more forward-thinking way. It's not about, my father's generation. It was all about who had the corner office and so on, right? I mean, that is very, very, very gone. And it's much more, I think, almost a democratic process around space. That's what activity-based working is about. It's about us getting together. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are in the organization. It's how can we best be together to do our best work together. And then to create space is not only to do that, but then if you need a space to reflect, and then how do we support you when you're working from anywhere? So it's kind of those mixtures that we're putting together, and we're already moving forward on some of it. And I think we'll be, chatting about a lot more of it as autumn arrives and we move into winter of this year. So.
Thank you very much, Ray. I know that my counsel and discussion has been sort of, if you think about 100% of your work time, what's the future going to be? Some people might decide that 100% of that can be at home. Some people might decide that they actually want to return to the office for 100% of the time. But for a lot of us, it'll be something in between. We might decide to spend half of our time at home doing singular work and half of our time in the office, doing meetings and connecting with people. And the other thing that's to your point in terms of the flexibility, that may change from week to week, depending on the projects and the structures that are in. I might have a week where I'm 100% at home, diligently going about single work to complete a task, but I might spend the next week in the office, recounting what I've done in project meetings, doing things. So we're going to see this very fluid structure, and no doubt you've got that as part of your design language as well. So thank you very much. That's our people and place sections covered. We'll get back to Keith now and talk a little bit about the technology. So, Keith, you're right. We've got this wonderful research and development facility here in EMEA, in Galway. You and your team have been thinking about the future of work and workplace transformation prior to the pandemic. We've done a lot of work around AI. You and your team in particular have been leading that charge. What are we designing for? What's in our technology platforms that's going to enable our customers, deal with some of the things that Elle and Ray have discussed around people and place at a platform level, at a technology level? What are you and the team when you're looking at your virtual whiteboard and thinking, what elements can we design that will assist the journey? I'd love to know a little bit more about that if we could.
Yeah, and we're thinking about it. We're thinking about it very differently from before, right? We have a lot of features and technology that actually serve us well right now, that weren't, but we used in ways that we didn't originally design them for. So we started asking ourselves the question of, well, how are people likely to work now and next? And we're lucky, you mentioned the team here in Galway, but we're lucky from a regional perspective that, we have a lot of the collaboration platform covered across R&D and engineering locations in, not just in Galway, but also in the UK, in Oslo, in Norway, and really across the region. And that represents not individual pieces, but our device platform, Teams messaging, calling, meetings. We're very well positioned, I think, in the region to be able to focus on this. And what we've been doing is looking at what do we think that will happen next. And I think the now and next is very important, because we all got thrown into the immediate work from home. What that led to was what I would call a democratization of video, or a democratization of collaboration. And what I mean by that is it was the same for everybody. We were all individuals on the end of a video session collaborating together. There was not the scenario where, I'm working remotely, apologetically being the only person that's remote while everybody else is in the meeting and you're kind of left out. So it was totally democratized. So the now is all about focusing on what I would call collaboration without compromise, right? So you collaborate from where you want, in the way that you want, and we provide tools to do that. So, you can see I'm in a pretty messy office environment here. I've got cycling kit and all sorts of things around me. So if I want to go and, blur that out in my background, that allows me to collaborate, in a way that's not providing distraction to anybody else, or I can put myself into a virtual office environment if I want a more professional look than my current background. And of course, I can do that not just not just on the device that I'm on, but also in the WebEx meetings client and across the portfolio. So if I happen to be out on the road and I want to collaborate with somebody, I'm on my mobile device, I can change the background there as well. It has to be something, again, that there's no compromise. It's across the entire portfolio. So that's very much about the now. But if we look at where next, and we've heard this a lot from Ray, what about the return to office? We have to get ready for maybe that democratization breaking down a little bit, where maybe now there's some people in the office and some people at home, but we don't want them to lose out. There still shouldn't be compromise. So we're going to, I think, see more of a hybrid way of working, where you've got some people in an office environment, some people choosing to, or maybe needing to be remote. And again, we have a lot of the tool set already in place for that. It's just maybe not what it was. It wasn't intended to deal with a pandemic, but the underlying technology is there. So, there's no reason why, if somebody is at home or part of the team are at home, that they're left out of that collaboration. Some of it is cultural, some of it is technology. For sure, we'll have the technology piece solved. You don't need to worry about that. But it's important that end users and IT administrators work with their people and work together to make sure that that sort of democratization of collaboration continues. Your key stakeholder may be remote, even if you've got some people in the office. So it's important that the tools around sharing, the tools around framing up the user and getting the best view and presenting yourself well on video, that all of that is maintained. And I think the key thing about getting back to the office is looking at things like safe return to the office and then empowering that remote worker. So if you think about, just to dwell slightly on some of the more advanced functionality, the AI and machine learning piece, there's not so much of a desire to touch a screen anymore like there was before. We have some beautiful panes of glass that present our collaboration technology. But in terms of the safety in this current pandemic, if I can avoid touching that, it's good for me, it's good for the next person, it's good for the operation of the building because less cleaning is needed. But what about just using my speech? What if I can say our wake word? I'm on a live system, so I won't say it right now, but if I say, okay, followed by the word WebEx, and then ask it to join a meeting or to call L, or I can have that interaction in a completely zero touch way. We developed that from a productivity perspective, but now it turns out that it's hugely useful in this type of environment. And just the last thing to show you, if I put my device here into diagnostics mode, let me just show you how this can also be used in a way that is now this. So you're now seeing the full frame, the full view of my rather messy office here, but you're seeing some of the diagnostics and some of what's going on behind the scenes, right? So if I was in an environment that's this small, I could almost reach both walls, right? So if the social distancing guidelines in a given country is 2 meters or 1 meter or 6 feet, whatever it might be, I can configure a system in that way. If it's detecting 2 faces in a small space, then we're probably breaking a guideline. I'd like to know about that. The building people would like to know about it. The cleaning crew would like to know about that. We can automate a lot of this. We can use the technology that's already there. You can see up in the top corner here, the people count is 1. So you could configure that for each given space in a building to enable that safe return to office, to say that if we're exceeding the capacity in a given space, then the correct form of notifications could kick in and can deal with that. And that's something that in some ways these are unintentional. This was not, we had very intentional use for building utilization. This was not an intentional use case, but we have the baseline intelligence across every aspect of the portfolio, and we intend to build on that more and more. So that's just some examples of, as we get to the future workplace in terms of, say, a post-COVID or dealing with COVID timeframe. That's how I expect that we can leverage some of those, some of those technologies.
So you've got the WebEx platform. We've already been designing for a number of use cases that we can now extend from. We've sort of enabled the unintended innovation, as the terminology is. And of course, you're not stopping there. We're continuing our development journey, which remains largely unchanged from the path that we set before. It just has greater relevance now, I suppose, in a post-pandemic world.
That's a great way to think about it. I mean, we've had a very, very solid strategy. This makes it a lot more relevant, and it's on us to accelerate that. We've been on a good path. We've, good technology leadership. We've got a great engineering team, and we've got people that know how to deploy this, and great partners that can make this happen. So yeah, the strategy I think is solid. We'll do more, and we'll try to do it faster. I think that's where we're going.
But when we're doing more and we're doing it faster, it predicates really, a cloud delivered model. Do you think if we're moving at the pace that we're doing, the old days of having an on-prem box that we didn't upgrade for 10 years at a time is probably passed us by?
Yeah, I mean, we want to, cater for every type of deployment, but for sure to reach that type of speed and to deploy features and have them work in this way, a cloud-first deployment is definitely favorable. But, we've also seen a lot of very, very rapid, very successful upgrades of premise systems, which wouldn't be surprising to us. But there's often anxiety about, well, it's not broken, don't fix it. Leave the on-premise system sit there in the corner and just work. But suddenly, to enable remote working or other scenarios, we've seen that lots of organizations have had to do that, and a lot have also accelerated their journey to the cloud as well, because it just puts them onto that reliable, secure system that as the innovation happens, you just get it. That's one of the main benefits of that pace that we can achieve at cloud scale.
So we can take a customer with an on-prem installation, we can connect them to the cloud so they can get all of the benefits of all of our research and development and AI capabilities, and connect that back to their existing infrastructure.
Yeah, that's true too. Yes, yeah, good point. That's been possible since the start of this year.
Wonderful. Look, I want to thank you very, very much to Elle, to Keith, to Ray, our experts here in Cisco for people, place and technology, covering the critical aspects that makes Cisco a great place to work, the number one great place to work in the world. Thank you for your contributions today. Thank you for sharing what it is that you've been going about in a pandemic and post-pandemic. It's very much appreciated, and I'm sure our viewers have gleaned a lot of good information for them to start to plan for in their own workplaces. Thank you very much.
Okay, give it a try.
Between wisdom and curiosity, there's a bridge. Between ideas and inspiration, trauma and treatment.
Gained a couple of more pounds since last time.
That's good for the baby.
Between the people and their leaders.
How's the hospital?
It's been very busy. It was busier today than yesterday.
When are you gonna come back?
Collaboration.
And then we have in the center.
And creativity.
You don't want that sketch to compete with the image.
Between the moments that make us who we are and keeping them safe, private,
That's great.
and secure, there's WebEx.